Well, hello again, everybody. Brandon here, coming to you from the front of my shop here that I got going on at the moment. So there's a little bit of some Christmas-themed items going on here at the front of the store now. And I've been painting some stuff here for the seller, the Christmas Sage. So there are some of my original artworks going on here, some of my Harvest Pumpkin themed stuff, some of my Christmas related items, a series of snowman ornaments that I've done, some smaller canvases, some winter cardinals back there. So this particular painting here, I've gotten some more requests for, so in this video we're going to be taking a look at my process of this one. So we're going to be doing a real-time tutorial, real-time walkthrough of this one where you can paint along with me, and it's going to be a fairly small canvas that I'm working with here, so hopefully it won't take us a lot of time to get this done. And pretty simple palette on this one. You're going to need some white, you're going to need some black, you're going to need a green, sap green I believe I'll be using, so something equivalent to that will work, and some red, a medium red value. Maybe just a hint of a blue here. I'll probably use some Phthalo Blue for some of these shadows, and that will be about it. Some smaller brushes will do. So if you want to get started and paint along with me on this one, let's go. Okay, so for this project here, what I have got is a 5x7 canvas that we're going to do here in portrait mode to do a Christmas tree. So again, you can use whatever canvas size you want. Obviously, if you go with larger canvases, it'll probably just take you a little longer to do this. So for this real-time walkthrough, I'm using a smaller canvas here so we can get this done in a relatively short period of time. I'm going to start with a 3/4 inch brush. And all we're looking for here is a background of this painting, which is mostly just a mix of a little bit of green with some black and then some white thrown in there to lighten everything up to create a kind of a distant, snowy looking background scene. So I have just globbed some grays in here with just a hint of green. And it doesn't really matter, rhyme or reason here, what pattern you make or create in the background, because we're going to come back in here with 1 or 2 passes and change a few things up on it to create our finished background. So for right now, we're just globbing in a little bit of gray with just a hint of some green in some areas, and I'm going to add in a little bit more white this time around. Now the center of this obviously is going to be where our tree is going to land, so I don't have to worry about full coverage so much in the middle. So I'm just going to cover up the areas around that, and we will put the tree in the middle once we've finished this part up. So now there is just some random gray with a little bit of green mixed in there. First pass done. Now all I'm going to do here is come in and touch that brush into just a little bit of pure white. Okay, and we're going to make it a little bit more of a snowy looking deal here by blending that in to that paint that's already there in some areas. And again, I'm going to just touch a little bit of white on the end of that brush and come right in on top of this. I'm just kind of swirling it in. Again, a little bit of white on there. Swirl it into the paint that we've got on the canvas. And this acrylic, you know, it dries fairly fast, so you want to kind of get in here and do this before it's completely dried. If this is already dried on you, that's okay. You can accomplish the same thing by just alternating some darker and lighter tones of this color that you've got out here. Now I'm going to go into some green and black about even green and black mix and come in here and create the idea that there maybe are some more trees back there in the distance by touching that color in amongst some of our snowy looking background back there. We're not trying to do anything specific here. We're just trying to put some color out here on the canvas that's going to be a background that is completely out of focus for the viewer in terms of the Christmas tree that we put in the foreground. So this doesn't have to be anything specific at all. It can be totally random. And we're keeping everything very soft, so we don't have any real hard edges that we can see anywhere in there. And I basically just kind of keep working this brush around as the paint that's on here is drying. And the reason I'm doing that is that it just continues to kind of fade out and blend out those edges as everything's drying. If I just continue to kind of work the brush. All right. So again, nothing real hard, nothing real specific, just glob it out there, spread it around, move it around until you're happy. That gives us all we're really looking for on a background. Now here in the middle, we're going to drop our tree in, and we need our base tree here, our shape and everything, to be really, really dark. So I'm going to go in a mix of mostly black with just a hint, just a little tiny bit of green in there to create our initial base tree here. So we're going to have a Christmas tree that the peak of it, or the top of it anyway, is up in this vicinity somewhere, and then it covers the bulk of the canvas moving down. So this initial pass here with this darker color is not going to be the actual outer edge of the whole tree. This is just covering up the center part of where the tree is going to be. So we're going to take this darker color and we're going to glob it in here to give ourselves a place to start, is all we're looking for here. So this is going to be skinnier than the finished product, so to speak. The actual tree will extend out along both sides of this. Something to that extent that we also accomplished with our slightly larger brush. Now we're going to drop brush sizes here, and I'm going to go with, well, maybe something that's about a little 1/4 inch flat brush right here. You can use a small angled brush, anything that's semi-small, doesn't really matter. Go back into our mostly black mix that's got just a hint of green in it and start to define out this tree a little bit better. So we'll give it a top here, maybe a couple of little branches that stick out there, and I can see that I need to darken that up a bit. And then as you work your way down here, we'll just create some more branches that are poking out. And you can make your tree literally look obviously however you want, whatever kinds of branches you want and whatever direction you want. That's the beauty of trees. No two ever really look the same. But we're doing this initially with this fairly dark color. That way we can come back in and put our highlights over the top of this. Just work your way down the tree. I like to work from top to bottom. That's just me personally. You do it however you want. And you can make this thing as full with limbs or as sparse as you would like. Obviously, it's your tree. You do what you want to do. I'm just continuing to get more paint because this is a small brush, so I'm having to go back into the paint a little more frequently. And I may actually go back to my larger brush to finish the middle of this back out. So I'm going to use this smaller brush to do my edges here. Just creating limb texture that's extending out along the edges of the tree. That's all we're doing, tapping them in, dragging them out, nothing specific. We'll come back in and highlight these with some snow and some color to them to give them a little bit more of a green appearance. That's about all I'm going to do now with this brush for now. I'm going to go back to this larger one for just a second, just to finish out the middle of this. Dotting in some of that limb texture there. There we go. Now, you may have to give this a minute to dry. So what we're going to do is pause 5 minutes for station identification. No, we're not going to do any of that, but we are going to give this a few minutes to dry. So go get yourself a snack, maybe a bathroom break, whatever you need to do, obviously. We're going to give this about 5 to 10 minutes here to get good and dry before we come back to it. So let's take a quick break, and I'll be back momentarily. Alright, well, I hope everybody had them a nice little couple-minute break there for this to dry. I'm going to pretty much finish the rest of this painting with this same little small flat brush that I've got here. Again, any smaller brush that you've got will do. The first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into pretty much the same green and black mix that I've had going on that we've created our base tree with. But I'm going to lighten it up just a hair with a touch of white in it. And I'm going to see how this looks. What I want to do here is I'm going to start to create the hint of some individual pine needles that are on this thing, and we're not going to get too carried away with this, but I want to come in here on the tips of these branches and just touch in a little bit of this slightly lighter color with some green in it, just to give me the idea that there are some individual pine needles hanging out on this thing. And again, this is just more what they would call suggestion than anything. We're not looking for any kind of full coverage here. We're just looking for a few pieces of what would be pine needles hanging off the ends of some of these branches. And I do that just by some tiny little lines thrown in there. And I'm doing it mostly hanging off the bottom of them because I'm going to be sticking snow on the tops of them, so I'm not worried about what's going on up there. And right now I'm just working along these limbs I've got poked out along the edges, adding a little bit of this lighter mixed color, tapping it in there to create some small lines. And then I'm going to randomly come in here in the middle and do the same of what might be limbs that are making their way out towards the front of the viewer here, so to speak, the front of the canvas. And now all I'm going to do is change the values up a little bit of my green and black mix here. So I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to introduce a little bit more green into it this time. And essentially come back in and do the same thing. But there'll be just a tad bit more of green visible. And we like variation of color in here because everything's not going to be so monotone looking when we're done. So you make one pass with whatever color mix you make, and then you change it up a little bit by adding a little more green. Or in the next case, now that I've done this, I'm going to add just a little bit more white. So we're going to come through here one more time now, but I'm adding a little more white to the mix. Just for a few highlight touches. In here amongst our limbs. Before we get started with our snow that's going to go on. So we've essentially made 3 different passes on touching in some pine needle highlights. We did one with really the black and green mix that we started with our tree with just a little bit of white to lighten it up. Then we added more green. And then for this final pass, we've added even more white. So that gives us 3 different values for our highlight colors here. Makes things a little more interesting when it's all said and done. And you fill out your tree however you want to do it. I mean, you could make these things very full looking. You can keep them a little sparse. It doesn't really matter. Again, all trees are different. Well, I think I'm going to go with something about like that. Now we're going to work in putting our snow in place. So we want to lay our darker shadowed snow in first along these limbs, and then we will bring brighter snow highlights on top of it. So I'm going to go in to just a hint of blue and a little bit of black to kind of gray that out a bit, and then some white to create a shadowy snow color. Let's see what this looks like. We may adjust it, but we're going to come in here. So that's a really kind of gray blue back in there where there's not going to be much highlight at all on that snow. And we'll bring whiter snow out where the limbs are highlighted the most. So this is going to be kind of back tucked in a little bit. So I'm putting this darker color, so I'm just putting this color back in where there's some dark shadows in there, because again we're going to highlight out with some much lighter snow along the edges of these limbs. So this again is not real crucial. This is just where maybe some snow has made it back in there a little deeper. Now I'm going to take that same mix, I'm going to gray it out a little bit more with just a tiny bit of black. I'm going to gray it up a little bit more there so it's not quite so blue. And I'm going to lighten it up now with some white. And we'll make our first pass of some substantial snow anyway, hanging out on the outer edges of these limbs. And you just kind of put this in where you want, where you think some limbs are extending out that are going to have some snow on them. Now all we're going to do is bring even more white into that mix to lighten the value up even more. And then drop it right in on top of that darker shaded color. Anywhere where we think the snow is going to be the most visible. So yeah, we're just putting our highlight snow in here in the areas where we think will be catching the most light and the most visible. Now I am leaving some areas where I'm not putting anything in there because we are going to drop some ornaments on here, a couple of red Christmas ornaments. So I'm not worried about everything being covered up because I'm going to drop a few of those on here after we get done with this snow. On the top here there's going to be a bow or ribbon and a bow, so that's going to get some of that covered up too. But I think that is a pretty good look for us for right now, so we're going to move on to our ornaments. We're going to need to go into some red, and initially, like we do our everything else anyway, I start with the dark. That way I can put my lighter highlights on top of it. So we're going to darken up this red a good bit. I'm going to use some black to make it really dark. And then we're going to come in here and make our initial round shape for our ornaments with that really deep red color. And I'm just making some round Christmas ornaments here. As best as I can make a circle anyway. Easier said than done, right? So drop in a couple of dark red circles. And obviously you can put in as many of these things as you want. So your tree, drop in as many as you feel like you gotta have. I'm just going to try to fill in some of my gaps that I left open. And then we also want to put the bow on the top. So this same dark red that I'm using, I'm going to create a couple of I'm going to put in a couple of little loops here off of the tree that would be my bow or part of my bow. And then really just kind of glob in some dark red here that will be highlighted to be the rest of the bow itself. And then a couple of runners of ribbon that come down from it. So we're going to drag some of this dark red down the tree a little ways here. And do the same over here. I think I'm going to add an ornament out here on this end now that I've got my bow in place. And I think that will work. So now we've got our darkest reds in place. It's just a matter of coming back in now and highlighting this up. So I'm just going to go into some straight medium red this time around. And start to highlight these ornaments here. Now we're going to put in some red along these things to make it look like it's a glassy looking ornament. So it's not full coverage, it's kind of a broken coloration here where you leave some of that dark where the limbs of this tree that are reflecting on it make it not nearly as bright. So you touch in some of this red, but you don't cover the whole ornament. You just dab some along the edges and maybe some right down in the middle, because you never know from what angle these limbs are reflecting on there where you can and can't see the full color of that ornament that's sitting there, because it's, like I said, it's kind of a glassy metallic look. So you're not covering the entire ornament for sure. And then we're going to come back in and put a few little bright highlights to really make it kind of metallic looking. But for now, we're just touching in this red. Giving ourselves some of the highlight of it. Again, without fully covering the circle here. We don't want to do that. It won't look realistic. There. Now for the ribbon, I'm going to do something similar to that, but I'm going to give it more of coverage because the ribbon is not metallic, or at least we're going to say it's not. So I'm going to highlight it like I would anything else. I'm going to bring that bright red, or that straight medium red color right in on the top of the darker base that I've got there. And then where I'm creating parts of this bow, I'm going to bring the brighter red out in front where it's closer to it's coming closer to you, and leaving it darker down and away from you, so it looks like it's actually tied in a bow up there. All right. Now for the finishing touch there, we're going to add just a little bit of white to this mix to kind of pink it up a little bit. And you don't need a lot of this highlight in here to make this work. You need just a little bit in here to make this work. So you touch in just a couple of little places of that pink highlight in there. And I'm even going to touch it with my finger so it's not quite so bright and saturated there. Do a little finger painting here is what I'm going to do. So I touch a few places of it there. That one's actually not bad. If it's brighter than what I want, I will dab it with my finger to dull it down. And again, this is creating our metallic rounded Christmas ornament look. And since again you really have no idea where these reflections of these tree limbs will be coming from as you're viewing this, it's not like it has to be real specific in terms of where you put these highlights and where you don't. You can be somewhat random with them. There we go. And then on the ribbon itself, we're going to highlight just the closest areas that stick out from the rest of the bow. About like that. And really, there you have it. We've pretty much got ourselves a finished product there. All we got to do is drop a signature on here and call it done. So you sign yours how you like to sign it. I'm going to drop my signature in the corner. And I hope you guys enjoyed this little paint along. Simple little snowy Christmas tree painting. Subscribe to the channel if you hadn't already and want to see some future videos. I'll have other walkthrough tutorials with time lapses of some larger projects and some real-time walkthroughs of smaller projects like this. So until next time, happy painting, everybody.